Chosen ones, this woman needs your help right now. God is asking you to help woman immediately. The whisper in the storm. In the quiet suburb of Evergreen Hollow, where maple trees lined the streets like silent guardians, lived a woman named Elena Marquez. She was 38, a single mother of two, and someone who had once believed the world could be kind if you just tried hard enough. But life had a way of testing that belief until it cracked. Elena's days had become a blur of survival. Her husband had left 3 years earlier, taking not just his things, but the fragile sense of security she had built. She worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse's aide, coming home exhausted to children who needed homework help, meals, and the kind of love that couldn't be scheduled. The bills piled up like autumn leaves, electricity notices in red ink, a leaking roof that dripped into buckets during rain, and a car that coughed every morning before starting. Worst of all was the diagnosis that came last month. Her youngest, little Mateo, 6 years old, had a rare heart condition. The surgery he needed was possible, but the cost was astronomical, far beyond what insurance would cover or what Elena could scrape together. She prayed every night, kneeling beside Mateo's bed while he slept, whispering promises to God that she would do anything if only her boy could be healed. But the answers seemed silent. The doctor's appointments multiplied, the debt collectors called, and Elena felt herself fading, like a candle burning at both ends. Across the country, in a small coastal town called Havens Point, lived Daniel Reyes, a man most people would call ordinary. He worked as a carpenter, built furniture by hand, attended church on Sundays, and spent his evenings reading scripture or walking the beach at sunset. He wasn't famous, wealthy, or particularly charismatic, but for the past few months, something had shifted inside him, a quiet but persistent feeling, an urging that he was meant for more than his daily routine. It started as dreams, vivid images of a woman with tired eyes holding a child, standing in rain, reaching out. Then came the moments of sudden knowing, flashes during prayer where he felt God speaking directly. There is someone who needs you now. Do not wait. Daniel had dismissed it at first as imagination or wishful thinking, but the feeling grew stronger, almost unbearable, like a heartbeat he couldn't ignore. One evening, after a long day sanding oak for a new table, Daniel sat in his small living room and opened his Bible to Isaiah 6:8. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I, send me." The words pierced him. He closed the book, bowed his head, and whispered, "Lord, if this is you, show me what to do. I'm listening." That same night, Elena sat on her porch steps in the dark, staring at the foreclosure notice she had received that afternoon. Tears streamed down her face as she rocked back and forth. "God," she prayed aloud, voice breaking, "I can't do this alone anymore. If you see me, if you still care, please send help, send someone. I'm breaking." Miles away, Daniel felt a sudden jolt, like electricity through his chest. He stood up, heart pounding, and without fully understanding why, he opened his laptop and searched for heart surgery help for children. Pages of charities and stories appeared, but one small post on a community forum caught his eye. A nurse in Evergreen Hollow seeking assistance for her son's operation. The details matched the images from his dreams, the woman's weary description, the boy's age, the desperate plea. He stared at the screen for a long time. Doubt crept in. What can I do? I'm just a carpenter. But the urging returned, stronger. Go, help her now. The next morning, Daniel booked a flight. He told no one except his pastor, who prayed over him and said, "Sometimes God sends us to be the answer to someone else's prayer." Elena was at the hospital when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it. Scammers had been relentless, but something made her answer. "Hello?" A calm voice on the other end. "Elena, my name is Daniel Reyes. I believe God told me to call you. I know this sounds strange, but I've been praying and I saw your story. I want to help with Mateo's surgery. I don't have all the money, but I have some savings and I know people who can rally more. I'm on my way to Evergreen Hollow right now." Elena froze. Her hand trembled on the phone. How do you even know my name?" "I don't have all the answers," Daniel said gently, "but I know God does. He wouldn't let me rest until I reached out. Please, let me try." Tears filled Elena's eyes again, but this time they were different. Relief mixed with disbelief. "I prayed for help. I prayed last night, and you're here?" "I'm here because you prayed, and because God still moves through people who say yes." Over the next few weeks, the story unfolded like a quiet miracle. Daniel arrived in Evergreen Hollow and met Elena at a small coffee shop near the hospital. He brought not just money from his savings, but a network of friends, church members, fellow craftsmen, even strangers moved by the story, who donated, organized fundraisers, and covered costs. A surgeon who attended Daniel's old church offered to perform the operation pro bono after hearing the testimony. The surgery was scheduled. The night before, Elena sat with Mateo reading him stories while Daniel waited in the hallway, praying silently. When the doctor emerged hours later with the words, "He's stable, he's going to be okay," Elena collapsed into sobs of gratitude. Daniel stood beside her, tears in his own eyes, feeling the weight of obedience lift into joy. Months later, on a sunny afternoon, Elena and Mateo visited Havens Point. They walked the beach with Daniel, the same stretch where he had once wrestled with the call. Mateo, now healthier and full of energy, ran ahead, laughing as waves chased his feet. Elena turned to Daniel. "I still can't believe it sometimes. God used you, a stranger, to save my son." Daniel smiled softly. "He used your faith to call me. We were both chosen for this moment, you to trust, me to act. That's how God works. He connects the broken pieces through ordinary people who listen." As the sun dipped towards the horizon, painting the sky in gold, Elena whispered a quiet thank you to the one who had heard her cry in the storm. And somewhere in the vastness, another chosen one felt a new stirring, a reminder that help, when God asks, often arrives exactly when it's needed most. In the heart of Evergreen Hollow, a suburb nestled between rolling hills and whispering forests, Elena Marquez lived a life that once brimmed with simple joys, but now teetered on the edge of despair. At 38, she was a woman whose spirit had been forged in the fires of hardship. Born to immigrant parents who had crossed borders for a dream of better tomorrows, Elena had grown up learning that resilience was not a choice, but a necessity. She married young to a man named Carlos who promised forever, but delivered only fragments. Their union produced two beautiful children, Sofia, now 12, with her father's sharp wit and her mother's kind eyes, and Mateo, the 6-year-old bundle of energy whose laughter could light up the darkest room. But 3 years ago, Carlos vanished like smoke in the wind, leaving behind a note that read, "I can't do this anymore." Elena didn't cry then. She couldn't afford to. Instead, she threw herself into work at St. Mary's Hospital, scrubbing floors, changing linens, and assisting nurses with the quiet dignity of someone who knew every shift meant food on the table. Her days stretched from dawn to dusk, a relentless cycle of alarms, bus rides, and weary footsteps home. The house, a modest 2-story with peeling paint and a garden she no longer had. In the heart of Evergreen Hollow, a suburb nestled between rolling hills and whispering forests, Elena Marquez lived a life that once brimmed with simple joys, but now teetered on the edge of despair. At 38, she was a woman whose spirit had been forged in the fires of hardship. Born to immigrant parents who had crossed borders for a dream of better tomorrows, Elena had grown up learning that resilience was not a choice, but a necessity. She married young to a man named Carlos who promised forever, but delivered only fragments. Their union produced two beautiful children, Sofia, now 12, with her father's sharp wit and her mother's kind eyes, and Mateo, the 6-year-old bundle of energy whose laughter could light up the darkest room. But 3 years ago, Carlos vanished like smoke in the wind, leaving behind a note that read, "I can't do this anymore." Elena didn't cry then. She couldn't afford to. Instead, she threw herself into work at St. Mary's Hospital, scrubbing floors, changing linens, and assisting nurses with the quiet dignity of someone who knew every shift meant food on the table. Her days stretched from dawn to dusk, a relentless cycle of alarms, bus rides, and weary footsteps home. The house, a modest 2-story with peeling paint and a garden she no longer had time to tend, echoed with the sounds of her children's needs. Sofia's questions about school projects, Mateo's endless whys. Then came the storm that threatened to drown her entirely. It started with Mateo's persistent cough, dismissed at first as a cold, but when his lips turned blue during a playground run, Elena rushed him to the emergency room. The diagnosis hit like a thunderclap: congenital heart defect, a rare condition called tetralogy of Fallot. The doctors explained it in clinical terms: malformed valves, restricted blood flow, but to Elena it was a nightmare made real. Surgery was the only cure, a complex procedure that could save his life, but at a cost of over $150,000. Insurance covered a fraction, the rest was on her. Nights blurred into prayers. Elena would tuck Mateo in, his small chest rising and falling unevenly, and kneel by his bed. "God," she'd whisper, her voice raw, "I know you've got a plan, but please don't take my boy. Send help. Send someone. I can't carry this alone." Outside, rain often pattered against the window, as if the heavens wept with her. The bills mounted, medical statements in stark envelopes, utility shut-off warnings, and now a foreclosure notice on the house her parents had helped her buy. Friends offered sympathy, but no one had the means to bridge the gap. Elena felt invisible, a shadow in her own life, questioning if her faith was just a fragile illusion. Far across the map, in the serene coastal town of Havens Point, where the ocean met the sky in endless blue, Daniel Reyes led a life of quiet purpose. 42 years old, he was a master carpenter, his hands calloused from years shaping wood into heirlooms, tables that held family dinners, chairs that cradled weary bodies. Daniel had never married. His heart had been broken once in youth, and he'd poured his love into his craft and his faith instead. He lived in a modest cottage overlooking the sea, where mornings began with coffee and scripture, and evenings ended with walks along the beach, listening to the waves as if they carried messages from the divine. For months, an unrest had stirred within him. It began subtly, a dream where a woman stood in pouring rain, clutching a child, her eyes pleading for rescue. The image lingered upon waking, a persistent echo. Then came the whispers during prayer, soft but insistent. A soul cries out, "Will you answer?" Daniel journaled these moments, dismissing them as products of an overactive mind or perhaps indigestion from late-night snacks, but they intensified. One Sunday, during a sermon on the parable of the Good Samaritan, the pastor's words struck deep. God doesn't always send angels with wings. Sometimes he sends us. That night, Daniel sat in his dimly lit living room, the Bible open on his lap. Flipping through pages, his eyes landed on Isaiah 6:8 once more. "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?' And I said, 'Here I am, send me.'" A chill ran through him, not from fear, but from recognition. He closed his eyes and prayed fervently, "Lord, if this is your voice, make it clear. I'm no hero, just a man with tools and time. But if you need me, here I am." The response came swiftly, like a gust of wind through an open window. That very evening, as Elena sat on her porch in Evergreen Hollow, the rain drumming a somber rhythm on the roof, she broke. The foreclosure notice crumpled in her hand, and she cried out louder than before. "God, please, this woman needs your help right now. I'm asking, no, begging, send your chosen ones. Help me immediately." Her voice echoed into the night, carried perhaps by unseen winds. In Havens Point, Daniel bolted upright from his chair, his heart racing as if he'd run a mile. A vision flashed, the woman from his dreams, her face clearer now, her plea audible in his soul. Shaken, he grabbed his laptop and typed into a search engine, "Children's Heart Surgery Assistance Needed." Forums and charity sites scrolled by, but one post leapt out, a desperate message on a local support group page. "Single mom in Evergreen Hollow seeking help for son's heart surgery. Mateo, age 6. Any aid appreciated." Attached was a photo, Elena holding Mateo, her eyes mirroring the exhaustion he'd seen in dreams. Doubt warred with conviction. "This is crazy," Daniel thought. "I'm not rich. I have savings from years of work, but not enough for surgery." Yet the urging persisted. "Go now. Trust me for the rest." He spent the night in prayer, and by dawn, resolution had solidified. He called his pastor, Reverend Hayes, who listened intently. "Daniel," the Reverend said, "this sounds like a divine appointment. God equips those he calls. Go with my blessing and the church's support." Daniel liquidated what he could, sold a few pieces of furniture, dipped into his emergency fund, and rallied his small community. Friends donated, a local business matched funds, and soon he had $20,000, a start. He booked a flight to Evergreen Hollow, packing only essentials and his Bible. Elena's phone rang the next day amid the hospital chaos. She was mopping a hallway when the unknown number appeared. Hesitant, she answered. "Is this Elena Marquez?" The voice was steady, warm. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Daniel Reyes. I'm from Havens Point. This might sound unbelievable, but I've been having visions, dreams about you and your son. God led me to your story online. I believe he's asking me, us, to help right now. I'm flying out today. Can we meet?" Elena's world tilted. She sank against the wall, whispering, "How is this possible? I prayed, just last night." "And he heard," Daniel replied softly. "Sometimes answers come through strangers. Let me prove it." They met at a quaint diner near the hospital, the air thick with the scent of coffee and fresh pies. Elena arrived wary, her nurse's scrubs rumpled, eyes shadowed by fatigue. Daniel, with his salt and pepper hair and kind smile, extended a hand. "I'm not here to pity you," he said. "I'm here because God whispered your name to me." Over steaming mugs, Elena poured out her story, the abandonment, the diagnosis, the crushing debt. Daniel listened, then shared his own, the dreams, the scripture, the undeniable pull. "I have $20,000 to start," he said, sliding an envelope across the table. "But more is coming. My church is organizing a fundraiser, and I know a surgeon, Dr. Harlan, from my hometown congregation. He's renowned in pediatric cardiology. Let me call him." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "Why me? Why now?" "Because you're chosen too," Daniel replied softly. "Your faith called out, and God is responding through his people." The days that followed were a whirlwind of grace. Daniel stayed in a modest motel, coordinating efforts. Dr. Harlan, moved by the tale, reviewed Mateo's files and agreed to lead the surgery at a reduced rate, waiving his personal fee. Fundraisers spread. Online campaigns went viral in Daniel's network. A community bake sale in Evergreen Hollow raised thousands, and anonymous donations trickled in. Sophia, inspired, started a lemonade stand with friends, dubbing it Hearts for Mateo. But challenges arose. Mateo's condition worsened. A fever spiked, delaying plans. Elena doubted again, confiding in Daniel during a late-night hospital vigil. "What if this is all a cruel joke? What if God forgets?" Daniel took her hand gently. "He doesn't forget. Remember the Israelites in the desert. Manna came daily. Help arrives when needed most. They prayed together, and the fever broke by morning. The surgery day dawned crisp and clear. Matteo, brave beyond his years, hugged Elena. "Mommy, is the angel man here?" he asked, referring to Daniel. "Yes, mijo. He's praying for you." In the waiting room, Daniel paced, reciting psalms. Hours stretched like eternity until the surgeon emerged. Successful. Matteo's heart is strong now. Recovery brought new bonds. Daniel helped with chores, read stories to the kids, and shared meals with Elena. Conversations deepened about loss, faith, dreams deferred. Elena learned of Daniel's own unspoken grief. A sister lost to illness years ago, fueling his empathy. Months later, healed and whole, Matteo ran along Havens Point Beach during a visit. Elena and Daniel walked behind, the ocean's roar a symphony of renewal. "You were the chosen one God sent," Elena said, her hand brushing his. Daniel smiled. "We all are, in our moments. The key is listening and acting immediately." As the sun set, casting golden hues, Elena felt peace settle like a long-awaited embrace. The divine call had echoed across distances, weaving two lives into a tapestry of hope. And in quiet corners of the world, other chosen ones stirred, ready for their whispers in the storm. The end.